Hi, Hokies. I'm Tech Sideline founder Will Stewart. Welcome into episode 243 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We got lots of good stuff coming up today, and I think we'll be here a while. We'll start with football recruiting, 6 commits in 7 days. Then we'll cover last week's announcement of the ACC Football Scheduling Model. And lastly, we will wear out the topic of the day, which is conference realignment. It's all coming up next on the Tech Sideline Podcast. All right, welcome back in. Everything old is new again. Virginia Tech has 15 commitments in football, and half of them are from the state of Virginia. Not exactly half. That sounds painful, but you know what I mean. Just like Frank Beamer's early days, the ACC has released a new football scheduling model, and Hokie fans are once again asking themselves what in the heck the ACC office was thinking, just like every scheduling model in the past. And Hokie fans find themselves filled with angst over conference landscape shifts. Just like many times in the past, Virginia Tech fans have FOBLO, fear of being left out. We'll talk about all of that. So let's introduce the crew. Across the way, we've got the man who just celebrated his 1-year anniversary with us, managing editor David Cunningham. So welcome, David.
Gift.
Yeah. Oh, so it's funny you bring that up. The 1-year anniversary gift is paper. So that's exciting. David, I bought you a ream of paper from Walmart, and
Sick.
I put a bow on it. So remember to get that before you leave the office today. In the red shirt chair, we got, did I mention David's the managing editor? I think I left your title out. There you go. All right. In the red shirt chair, we got the man who despises conference realignment discussions, but we're going to make him talk about it anyway. Lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. Yes, they did text each other and ask, what color are you wearing today? And they agreed they were
There's no such thing.
There you go, Nick. Thank you.
At least we're wearing Virginia Tech colors.
Hey, you know, I have to go through my wardrobe. So behind the scenes, producing all by himself for the first time ever, sports media and analytics student 2024, is that right? Nick Brown. All right. Congratulations, Nick, flying solo. So Malcolm is in the area in case anything goes horribly awry, but Nick's flying by himself. So that is exciting. I'm going to laminate my show notes and give them to you afterwards as a keepsake. So before we get into the show, we want you to remember to like, if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. We're slowly approaching 6,000 YouTube subscribers, so help us get there and click the notification bell so you'll be notified when we post a video or when we go live. So the TSL podcast is sponsored by Commonwealth NIL, leaders in navigating name, image, and likeness. CNIL, as we call them, has already inked Justin Mutz, Hunter Couture, Darius Maddox, and Sean Padula to contracts. And just yesterday, they announced that Big Pat Wessler signed on with them as well. So I was thinking about that. 7 feet tall.
I saw your tweet. We're going to have to redesign the set.
We got to get him in here on the podcast. And I'm thinking he's going to look like Will Ferrell in Elf sitting on the tiny toilet when he comes in and sits on our chairs. So we have to get him in there just for that reason alone. So visit CommonwealthNIL.com to learn more about their membership programs and merchandise sales, which are ways that you can support Virginia Tech's NIL efforts. All right, gentlemen, so let's begin, and this is right in Chris's wheelhouse, and I'm sure, you know, David retains everything he hears, so he'll be good at this too. Let's begin by talking about football recruiting. So Tech had a really good week. June 28th, linebacker Tavarian Copeland, state of Virginia. June 29th, linebacker Asen Stevens from out of Indiana. June 30th, linebacker Caleb Woodson, I am sensing a trend here, from the state of Virginia. July 1st, defensive back Braylon Johnson out of the state of Virginia, Lauren Johnson's son. Yep. July 2nd, athlete/running back Traylon Mitchell out of North Carolina. Then they took a day off, and then on July 4th, they got athlete/safety Thomas Williams out of South Carolina. So that brings Virginia Tech to 15 commitments for the year. 7 of them are from the state of Virginia. So, Chris, give me your thoughts on this flurry.
Well, they were slacking on Sunday. That's the one day they didn't get any commitments. But I'm thankful because that was the one day I got to take completely off.
Yes.
So, but yeah, obviously linebacker is a big deal in this class, of course. Yeah. And they got 3 of their top targets this past week. Each of them very different prospects. Tavorian Copeland he's really long and lengthy, but he reminds me a lot of Kelly Lawson, who is currently in the program as a Sam linebacker. And, it's going to take him a couple years, 2 or 3 years of strength and conditioning, nutrition, things like that before he's big enough. And he knows that with his the interview he did on TSL with Jason Stame last week. He said that's got to be his primary focus.
So he's listed at 6'4", 193 out of Appomattox. 6'4", 193. That he does need to hit the weight room. But like you said,
exactly. Asen Stevens from Indiana, I think, is a guy who quite possibly will end up as a 4-star recruit. Yeah. He missed most of his junior year with a torn ACL, which is why his offer list, while good, very good actually, was not quite as good as, I don't think it matches up with his sophomore film. I think once his senior film is out there and he shows he's over his ACL, then I think his ranking will
He's
go
the
up.
guy with the Iowa State offer that you really love.
Anybody who offered by Matt Campbell and heavily pursued by Matt Campbell is good enough for me. That guy's the best developer of 3-star talent in the country, bar none, without question.
Which is kind of the situation Virginia Tech is in these days.
Absolutely.
They need to be a developmental program.
Caleb Woodson, he's a guy right now, I do half stars because I think, the number 35 recruit in the country will be a 4-star recruit, and the number 350 recruit in the country will be a 4-star recruit. In reality, the 35th player in the country is closer to 5-star status, and the number 350 player in the country is closer to 3-star status. But people look at him and see 4 stars, and without going into any depth of research, they're like, oh, they're both 4 stars, right? Same player. So now I do a half-star system, and I also base it on fit for Virginia Tech's system. And I've got Woodson right now probably as a 3.5 star. I haven't finalized my list or anything like that, and I haven't thought about every single player, but I think he's a guy who's a fantastic fit in Tech's scheme, probably as a Sam linebacker. That's where he's been targeted. He's got a really nice frame. You see him in a picture next to Chris Marv, and Chris Marv's starting linebacker in the SEC, and Caleb Woodson is just dwarfing him.
Listed at 6'2", 200. You think he looks bigger?
He depended. He's listed anywhere from 6'2", 200 to 6'3", 205. He looks closer to the 6'3" range to me. And honestly, he looks bigger than 205 already. Yeah. I mean, this is a guy who can certainly play around 230 at Virginia Tech and could be 220 by the time he gets here next year. So I think he's an excellent pickup. Maybe the most versatile defender in the state of Virginia. He lines up at corner. He lines up at safety. He lines up in the slot. He lines up on the edge. I mean, just a really good player. Braylon Johnson, I have similar thoughts about. I don't think Braylon Johnson is going to show up and wow anybody like in a combine setting, but he's an excellent football player with a good offer list. I think some schools like Penn State and Oklahoma who offered him, I don't think they pursued him all that hard because I think there was always the whole factor of, well, he's probably going to go to Virginia Tech, so it would
because of his father,
right? It wouldn't be a great use of our resources to recruit him.
So to be clear, he's out of Highland Springs. He is Lauren Johnson's son. We like players from Highland Springs.
Yeah, well, very much. So that's
listed at 6'0", 167. So that kind of gets back to what you were saying about.
Yeah, but if you look at his recruiting picture on Tech Sideline, with his arms, how long they are. I mean, it's like his arm. He's got like Jimmy Williams arms.
It's funny. You showed me that picture, and I thought Jimmy Williams.
Yeah, exactly. He could play like wide safety or corner. Right now, I think he plays corner for Highland Springs. I would project him as a corner right now, but he's a versatile guy. And again, Shane Beamer gave it a shot because Shane played at Virginia Tech with his dad. But other than that, like nobody else gave it like a real shot because I think everybody assumed he was going to Tech. But again, to me, he's like a 3.5 to 4-star guy. Right now I'd maybe have him as 3.5, but if he gets up to, the 175, 180 range by the time signing day gets here, I could certainly give him a bump. Traylon Mitchell out of North Carolina, interesting prospect. The North Carolina schools recruited him as a defensive back. Virginia Tech is recruiting him as a running back who could play defensive back. He rushed for a little over 1,000 yards last year, over 10 yards per carry. Plays in a 3-back wing T, wishbone, double wing type offense. So he's kind of a difficult guy to evaluate because nobody runs that at the college level. But he's got very good speed. Very good speed. I think he won a state championship in track in North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken.
And you mentioned it was Darren Evans, right?
Yeah, Darren Evans was
who played
kind of
in
a
a similar system.
Similar recruiting story. Darren Evans, I believe, played in a wing T in Indiana. And
had insane number of touchdowns his senior year in high school, like 60 or some ridiculous number like that.
And played that fullback position, which is obviously up close.
That's the dive position?
Yeah, the dive position, exactly. Or there was a position that in my wing T in high school we called the 40 trap all the time.
Yeah.
Whenever the fullback was getting the ball, it was the 40 trap. And which we ran that play quite often because we couldn't do anything else. But anyway, Darren Evans was like from Big Ten country. He was the perfect Big Ten running back.
Yeah.
But none of those Big Ten schools offered him, I assume, because they felt like they couldn't get a great evaluation on him because of the system.
Yeah.
Did he eventually get drafted?
He did not get drafted. He got signed by the Colts
as an undrafted free agent.
Yeah, he played in a couple games for the Colts on special teams for like 1 year, but no, he was not a.
And he's one of those guys, if you could have running backs from the past, he's a guy you'd take.
Oh, well,
I'm not saying he's above Lee Suggs and stuff like that, but he was
darn good. Yeah,
he had a great career.
Thomas Williams. This is very much a Brent Pry recruit. Brent Pry had offered him at Penn State.
Yeah.
So like his Penn State offer that he's listed with, as far as I know, was not still committable because Brent Pry wasn't there anymore. He was a guy that Brent Pry personally evaluated and wanted. And I think he also had an offer from West Virginia. Great high school running back, but will probably play safety at Virginia Tech. Number 9 player in the state of South Carolina. So that's my quick, not so quick recap of those 6 recruits.
Yeah, but detailed. And I think my biggest takeaway is what you kind of mentioned earlier: 7 in-state kids, 8 out-of-state kids, and each one is from
7?
7 in-state.
7 in-state. There's 15 total.
Now, you weren't wrong when you said half. We're going to count
7.5.
Lath Ganem as half.
Okay.
He plays high school football in West Virginia
but he's
right
from
now,
Virginia,
but he's from
right?
Southwest Virginia.
So it's not painful at all.
Right.
He really is
exactly.
half.
There you go.
Half an in-state recruit.
But if you count him as West Virginia for this purpose, you got 7 in-state guys and then 8 out-of-state guys, and each one's from a different state. And that kind of
That's interesting.
That kind of shows. We talked about it when Brent Pry first assembled this staff. You've got guys who can recruit in Maryland and Florida and South Carolina and all over the place. And Virginia Tech is showing that, that big radius Brent Pry talked about. Virginia Tech's getting the guys that they want throughout that entire radius, and it's not just a couple states here or there.
Yeah, they got out-of-state commitments from guys in.
Let me read the list to you. So 7 from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Yes, I know it's a Commonwealth. And like as David said, no other state has more than 1. So let's see if I can go north to south, more or less. Indiana, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Tennessee. I left out West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, with the exception of Acer. Those 8 states are contiguous in that Mid-Atlantic region. You'll notice there is no Florida list there.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, and that's sort of what you would expect from this staff.
Yeah.
Now I wrote articles after the staff was put together saying I thought Virginia Tech would have a presence in Ohio and Indiana.
Right. That's true.
More and so in Ohio than Indiana, but I never grasped this until I guess it was about 6 years ago. I drove from Blacksburg to Green Bay to go to a Packers game. So I drove through West Virginia and Ohio and Indiana and Illinois and all the way up into Wisconsin, through the Rust Belt, I guess is what they call it. And I'm telling you, like if you can get a kid from Ohio or Indiana to visit Blacksburg, Appalachia they'll feel comfortable here.
Yeah.
There's not any mountains once you get through Ohio, but on the whole, it's a similar vibe. It's actually honestly a lot more. This area is a lot more similar to that area of the country than it is the eastern part of Virginia.
Yeah. Or imagine trying to convince a kid from Jacksonville, Florida, to come to Blacksburg. It obviously happened in the past, but it's a little bit more difficult, I would think, in terms of that specific the setting that they're in, because Jacksonville is not exactly middle of nowhere, Ohio.
Right. That's very much a blue collar part of the country.
Yeah.
And so I think those guys are good fits for Brent Pry program. Ultimately, this program, and we'll get into a conference expansion and everything like that later, but I think Virginia Tech at its peak was more Big Ten than SEC.
Yeah,
with how the Hokies recruited, just the whole lunch pail mentality. That's a lot more Rust Belt.
Virginia Tech fits more of the guys in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Indiana and Tennessee and Kentucky than it does the guys in Georgia and South Carolina.
And SEC is just SEC's flash. Of course, and Virginia Tech's not flash. The Big Ten, yes, they've got Ohio State.
I would think of it similar to Wisconsin.
Right, exactly. So I'm not sitting here saying that Ohio and Indiana are going to be big parts of the recruiting strategy, but Virginia Tech will spot recruit those states, and I think they can get good players there, good players who were fits for the program.
So here's the breakdown: 4 offensive linemen, 2 wide receivers, no tight ends. 1 running back. Would you say 1 running back?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I mean,
Mitchell.
Right. So and to be clear, when you say 2 wide receivers, we're talking about Take Heath and
Marcel
Baylor.
Right.
I'm projecting them as wide receivers right now. They're listed as athletes on the recruiting sites. But when I went through the commitment list yesterday, we had like 5 or 6 guys listed as an athlete. So they were thinking anybody who logs on to our recruiting commits and be like, okay, athletes, what position are they actually going to play? So I changed them around yesterday to try to get an accurate representation of where I think they're going to play. So
1 quarterback, Dylan his first name?
Yeah.
Wiki. No defensive tackles, 1 defensive end, 3 linebackers, 2 corners, and a safety. So that's a nice distribution. You're missing DTs and tight ends.
Yeah, I'm going to do some research, and for later this week, I'll have an article out about where Virginia Tech stands in recruiting right now. So with 15 commits, what do they need to target between now and signing day? Right. And defensive tackle is the position.
The number 1. I think in terms of tight ends, though, it's important to mention Virginia Tech just got 3 or 4 tight end commits this year, like signees this year.
Right.
Harrison St. Germain, bunch of those. Benji Gosnell.
And the kid from Georgia, who I like more than any of them, and I've already forgotten his name, even though I like him more than any of them. Daquan Wright.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, there's a handful of they just got 3 tight end signees.
It's not a big priority.
Defensive tackle, however, that's a different story.
Always a priority.
Virginia Tech lost one to a guy from Florida State. Or guy to Florida State from the state of Maryland, and I
remember we wanted that one.
Yeah, and he looks like a Florida State football player. Yep. But he was originally a 2022 recruit, and then he reclassified to 2023. And I thought Virginia Tech had a great shot at him. Then all of a sudden he commits to Florida State and then shows up and enrolls. Yeah. So it's like they got him into school for this class, and I don't know that anybody else could have. That might have been the reason. Elijah Hughes, who I think is an awesome football player, one of the best players in the state of Virginia from Northern Virginia. I think Virginia Tech was going to get Elijah Hughes, but his dream school was Stanford, and he's got a bunch of family in that part of California, and they go out there every year for vacation.
Wow.
He's so focused on academics, I think he's going to pick Stanford. He's from Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
But, sometimes you're going to lose one like that to Stanford, at least historically Virginia Tech has. Yeah. Remember the running back from Northern Virginia who everybody wanted?
Well, that was dear Brandon, right? Brandon Royster?
Yeah,
I think it was Brandon Royster wound up going
to Stanford. He was a 4-star guy that everybody wanted. And
dear Brandon is an old, has nothing to do with Joe Biden. It is an old message board legend.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate that Hughes is a defensive tackle. Like if he was like a defensive back or something, no big deal because we got plenty of those, right? But this is an in-state position of need, and I really, really worry that he's probably going to go to Stanford because he grew up more focused on academics and football. Good for him. I'm not criticizing him, as he should, but Stanford's his dream school. Yeah. So we'll see. Defensive tackle is a big position of need, and they've missed all their top targets there.
Wow.
So they're going to have to, unless they end up getting Hughes. So they're going to have to reset their board. They're going to have to find some new guys
and work the portal. But everybody loves to work the portal for defensive tackles.
Yeah.
All right. So to sum it up, 24/7 has Virginia Tech's class number 29th in the country currently. Number 32 in their composite, number 9 in the ACC with 0 4 stars. On 3 has Virginia Tech as the number 38 consensus team in the country in their consensus ranking. Number 9 in the ACC with 1 4-star, and that's Lath Ganem. So that's kind of the picture of Virginia Tech recruiting.
Let me give. Don't worry about the star rankings and things like that right now because they're incomplete. Some sites update their rankings for certain recruits at different times.
Yeah.
So, like for example, the Antonio Cotman kid who committed to Boston College on Saturday did not have a Virginia Tech offer, by the way, even though he's listed with one. Did not have a Penn State offer, even though he's listed with one. That's why he's going to Boston College, right? At any rate, the early evaluations of him was that he was a top 5, top 10 player in the state of Virginia. So he's got this, and so he's still ranked 4th in the state by rivals who haven't updated their rankings. But 247 has dropped him to 14th. On 3 has dropped him to 27th. In the state of Virginia.
And he let it slip in an interview that basically
everybody quit calling him except for Boston College. Right. So he's fallen down all the boards of all the coaching staffs. But yet, he still has the reputation of 4-star defensive back Antonio Cotman because that was his original ranking. Yeah. So it's kind of like Alec Bryant and Naquan Brown. Back when what was the LSU coach's name who won a national title but was actually a horrible coach and just got Orgeron. Right. So that guy, no idea how to run a football program. Right. So they're offering, like, they're not even that good at evaluating players, at least not early in the process, because they offered and took commitments from Naquan Brown, who now plays for Norfolk State. Right. And Alec Bryant, who eventually committed to Tech and now is like at Illinois or I don't know, Illinois. So these guys were originally 4-star recruits because they committed to LSU. Right. That helps. So after LSU reevaluated and realized that they didn't want them anymore, they decommitted. Right. Naquan Brown ends up at Pitt. Last one semester is now at Norfolk State. Those guys ended up as 3-star prospects. But even at the end, people were still referring to them as 4-star recruits because that was their original ranking. Yeah. Like, honestly, like, these rankings came out months ago, right? And it's way too early. Like, in my opinion, we're just getting through the evaluation period right now. The very first set of rankings should be coming out right now.
Yeah, and you're seeing some commitments, and you're seeing legit committable offers. Recruits have taken official visits, and that's also an indicator that that's a recruit that a school really wants.
Right. Yeah. So honestly, to me, you should not pay any attention unless it's the absolute top ranked guys that you pretty much can't miss in your evaluation on. I don't think you don't be sitting here looking in January through May saying, oh my gosh, this guy, we got to have him. He's 4-star. Everybody wants Antonio Cotman, right? Well, no, that's not true. And you're going to see by the end, the rankings reflect that. But the problem is the perception is already there because people pay attention to recruiting rankings way too early. I mean, these guys are still growing physically or not growing.
Yeah. All right. So first of all, Chris, scoot your chair out from the wall just a little bit.
Oh, Lord.
Just a scooch, man. There you go. All right. Thank you. Now I feel less nervous. So we're going to wrap it up. David, anything you want to add to what Chris said?
I think it's, June is such a big official visit month for recruits. That's kind of the first time Brent Pry and the staff really got this group of recruits targets that they wanted on campus. And you see how many guys committed after that. 6 guys in 7 days right after the official visit period started. Is that going to happen every single year? Yeah, I don't know.
I hope so.
Everybody hopes so, but I think that kind of goes to show you that Brent Pry's message is being accepted. The message, the way that Brent Pry wants this football program to be perceived, like recruits are like, oh my God, I like this. Like I want to commit to him. And it's, this is a program that struggled towards the end of the previous tenure with recruiting and didn't have a wide spread of, I'm going to get a guy from West Virginia and then a guy from Tennessee and a guy from South Carolina. It was, it wasn't as consistent as that. And I think you're seeing the potential of this program where it can recruit, but also that what Brent Pry, the message he's trying to push out to recruits is being accepted, and they want to come to Virginia Tech. And they might not necessarily be the top guys, but you got to start somewhere. If Virginia Tech's going to get those guys in the future, these are the guys it has to start with.
Yeah, so I like that. It's a process of, you got to get guys in here, you got to develop them, you got to start winning games, you got to start getting visits from, guys that they covet more and more. So let's move on to the ACC scheduling model, and I want to play a game with you guys. First of all, the ACC has gone to a 3-5-5 model, which means that you are going to play, there's a group of teams, 3 teams that you're going to play every year, and then you are going to rotate through the other 10, 5 one year, 5 the next year. You're going to play them 2 times in a 4-year span. So you'll see Tech playing NC State more often, Clemson more often, Florida State more often. Virginia Tech's, what are they called? Primary opponents are Pitt, UVA, and Wake. And here's the game I want to play. You'll notice there's a team missing from that trio, which you would expect to be
2
there.
as far as I'm concerned.
And we'll ask you that in a minute. Miami's the obvious one that's missing, that Virginia Tech's played every year since, I think, 1992. So I want to play a game with you. I'm going to go down the ACC schools in alphabetical order, and I want you to give me 2 schools, 2 teams that the school ought to play. So in other words, let's start with Boston College. What 2 teams should Boston College play every year?
Syracuse
and Pitt.
Well, guess who's on their list?
Really?
Syracuse and Pitt.
Yeah.
Cool.
And the 3rd team is Miami.
Yeah.
And that's all about ESPN wanting to play the Flutie highlight over and over now that it's almost 50 years
Somewhere
old.
Donna Shalala is smiling. Yeah.
Who should Clemson, what 2 schools should Clemson play every year?
Florida State and Georgia Tech.
I would say Florida State and NC State.
Well, Georgia Tech is their natural. That's like Virginia Tech versus West Virginia. That's actually they play. It's listed if you look
got a
up
name.
If you look up college football rivalries.
Oh
on
no,
Wikipedia,
I know it's a rivalry. I would, because I think they got all 3 of them, didn't they?
They got all 3 of them.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I made the mistake one time of saying, I believe it was on Twitter, who cares about Clemson playing Georgia Tech? And I got an earful from Clemson fans and Georgia Tech fans. This is important.
I think you've seen in recent years, and when NC State's good, like NC State Clemson's a really good game.
Yeah.
We all know about Florida State, and then Georgia Tech.
So Clemson got Florida State, Georgia Tech, and NC State. Great. Now, let's move on to Duke. What 2 teams should Duke play every year? Nobody cares, but go ahead and tell me.
Wake Forest and
North Carolina. I would say North Carolina and NC State.
Duke got North Carolina, NC State,
and Wake Forest. They got all 3 state schools.
Right. What 2 teams should Florida State play every year?
Miami and
Clemson. And Miami.
Clemson and Miami. They got Clemson and Miami and Syracuse.
Congratulations.
I read some message board scuttlebutt. Apparently, they wanted Syracuse. They want to go up there every other year.
I mean, I guess if you're trying to recruit up there,
I mean, Florida State's not any good at football these days. They got to get wins somehow.
So listen, we're 4 for 4 so far.
Yeah.
Right. So Georgia Tech is next. What 2 schools should Georgia Tech play every year?
Clemson and
So I think
NC State. I don't know.
I think I read somewhere that Florida State is like the closest school to Florida State is Georgia Tech, but
I think that's right.
But Florida State and Georgia Tech don't want to play each other.
So
really
Georgia Tech gets Clemson
and
apparently Wake Forest
Oh, I could see
That's
that.
a random. I mean, Georgia Tech doesn't really have any other rivals. Georgia's in
That's
the
like
SEC.
a throwback to like that 2008 ACC championship game.
So Georgia Tech's got Clemson, Wake Forest, and Louisville. Okay.
Okay.
That's yeah.
You're gonna. Some seems like they don't have two natural
Yeah.
right.
rivals, and you just got.
And here's another one that doesn't have two natural rivals. Louisville's next on the list.
And Louisville got Virginia, Miami, and Georgia Tech.
Well, we were supposed to guess.
Basically, Louisville got
Louisville's like, here's three random teams.
exactly, and they wound up getting the three teams Virginia Tech should have gotten, but we'll get to that in a minute. What two teams should Miami play every year?
Florida State and Virginia Tech.
Exactly, they got Florida State. They didn't get Virginia Tech,
But they got who? They got Louisville.
They got Louisville, and they got Boston College. Again, that's so they can
East,
show the Flutie Pass every year. This is easy. What two teams should North Carolina play every year?
Virginia
Virginia?
and
Honestly, Virginia and NC State.
Virginia and NC State.
If you're from a North Carolina
they gave them
perspective.
Virginia.
They got both of
And
them,
they got Duke.
and they got Duke.
Yeah,
All
naturally.
right. Now we're to NC State, and you're going to start connecting the dots here. NC State should play. Who should NC State? What two teams should they play? every
Clemson.
year?
North Carolina and Clemson, probably.
They got North Carolina, Clemson, and Duke. All right. Now we're at Pitt.
I think they should play Wake Forest too. I think that was the other one. I don't know if you saw.
Wake.
That was the other one. You know, Wake NC State's gone a long time as well, and that was kind of the other big one I think outside of Virginia Tech, Miami is that one that wasn't continued. But
So continuing the Big East theme, what two teams should Pitt play every year?
Syracuse,
West Virginia and
State.
West Virginia, Penn State, yeah.
Within the ACC.
Oh gosh, I mean,
I would say
Syracuse and probably Tech.
Syracuse and David?
I think Syracuse, Pitt, Virginia Tech is.
Here's the
I
thing.
think that's a good matchup.
I think from Pitt perspective, they should play Virginia Tech, but from Virginia Tech perspective,
perspective,
I don't think we should play Pitt, which shows you it's impossible to get
Boston
this right.
College, or you could convince me Boston College. Is
So
the other
Pitt
one.
got Boston College, Syracuse, and Virginia Tech.
There you go.
You know, again, continuing the Big East theme, hint, hint, what two teams should Syracuse play every year?
Pitt, Boston
Pitt
College.
and Boston College.
And, of course, we already know
Florida
they got
State.
Florida State.
Yeah.
So they got Pitt, Boston College, and Florida State. What two teams should UVA play every year? This is
North
easy.
Carolina and Virginia
North
Tech.
Carolina and Virginia Tech. They got both of them. And Louisville. What two teams should Virginia Tech play every year?
I personally have a different view on this than most Virginia Tech
But
fans.
most people would
Most
say
people are going to say Virginia and Miami.
Well, what if we
Virginia
say
and Miami.
North Carolina and Pitt?
Well,
I think it should be Virginia and North Carolina.
You could convince me that it
From a
should,
Virginia
you could
Tech
convince me that it
perspective.
should be Miami and North Carolina.
No, I think it should be North Carolina from a Virginia Tech perspective. But when I gave my answer from North Carolina perspective, it did not include Virginia Tech, which shows how hard it is to get this thing.
well, you knew the
Miami
North
and
Carolina schools were-
Miami and Virginia make sense for Virginia
I
Tech.
know.
It's
I
the
know.
oldest rivalry in like UNC and UNC and UVA is like the oldest rivalry.
Yeah, it's like
Virginia
South's
Tech
oldest
UNC
rivalry.
is new,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's no history.
So Virginia Tech, you could argue they should get UVA and Miami. They only got one of them. They got UVA and they got Pitt and they got Wake Forest. And then Wake Forest is really the oddball. They kind of got booted out of the North Carolina situation. Wake Forest plays Duke, okay, and they play Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
So, but the point of this exercise was for you to name two teams that every school should play and to realize that with the exception of maybe Wake, everybody else got their two marquee matchups. And then who cares who the third one is except Virginia Tech. So it was an oddball decision by the ACC to not continue that matchup.
I think the ACC catered to Miami. I mean, I remember reading quotes from the Miami athletic director.
Yeah, I put that on the board.
Yeah.
Dan Radakovich said he was asked about it, and David Teal tweeted this. He was asked at the ACC spring meetings down in Amelia Island back in May, asked about if they do go to this model, you know, obvious answers are for Miami to play Florida State and Virginia Tech. Yes. And Radakovich said, I don't know about Virginia Tech.
He said Florida State for sure. I don't know about the Hokies.
Yeah.
So Miami, the fans might view Virginia Tech as a rivalry. You know what fans Miami actually has, but the administration does not.
I would agree with that. And again, they wound up with Florida State, which of course is natural, and Boston College and Louisville. Okay, so I mean, I get it. Maybe we're skewed by our Virginia Tech perspective.
I think Louisville versus Miami. Like, remember the Catholics versus the convicts? Well, now it's the convicts
cheaters,
versus the convicts.
The cheaters versus the cheaters.
Oh man, I'm holding.
I
back
will
on
say
saying
though,
something.
like I think, like Virginia Tech's not in a terrible spot. Like I don't think Pitt and Virginia are bad. Like obviously not.
It has to be Virginia.
Yeah, you obviously are going to play Virginia, but I mean Pitt has been a good challenger in the past couple of years, and we'll see whether Virginia Tech will get a chance to win at Heinz Field anytime soon. But I think overall, like, imagine how more pissed you'd be, Will, if Virginia Tech ended up with Boston College.
Oh yeah. So the first time these matchups came out, I thought they were okay because I was afraid of having to play Boston College and Syracuse every year. I totally missed that Miami was not there.
That's actually the first thing I looked at. I was like, is Virginia Tech going to be playing Boston
I was more
College?
worried. Yeah.
And they didn't, so I was like, yes, great schedule.
And I actually tweeted out, not bad. And then I looked at him like, wait a minute, Miami's missing. This is not good. So Nick, by the way, I forgot to tell you to put the graphic up. Oh, you the man. Excellent. Thank you. So that was not met with unanimous. So anyway, let's go over. I was going to say that was not met with unanimous approval by Virginia Tech fans. They're going to miss Miami.
Yeah.
So let's go over Virginia Tech's, and we do not have a graphic for this for the YouTube audience. Let's go over Tech's home and away ACC schedules for the next 4 years because they were all released. So 2023 home is NC State, Pitt, Syracuse, and Wake. I like NC State. Pitt's getting to be more and more of a rival. Syracuse and Wake, okay. Away is Boston College, Florida State, Louisville. That's exciting. So in 2023, we'll go into Louisville for the first time. And that's more about visiting Louisville than
for the first time in a non-COVID year.
Yeah.
We went there in
correct.
2020. Yeah.
And then UVA. So Boston College, Florida State, Louisville, and UVA. That's actually a pretty good road schedule. 2024, I think this is arguably the best home ACC schedule. And again, these are just the ACC games. 2024 is Clemson, Georgia Tech, Louisville, and UVA. Solid.
I would say 2026 might be better.
Yes, and we'll
argue.
get to that in a second. I agree. The away games in 2024 are Duke, UNC, Pitt, and Wake. So North Carolina Hokies rejoice. You've got 3 games.
Like my dad lives in Danville. It's easier for him to watch us play North Carolina and Duke on the road than it is.
Well, that's gonna. It's
a
just
home
like
game.
that's like this year too. Virginia Tech this season, 2022, plays at Duke, at North Carolina, and at NC State.
And at NC State, yeah.
And you know what? I don't mind that. I
Well,
mean,
Malcolm's moving to Raleigh.
that's what I'm saying.
So I'm going to see him.
There's such a contingent of, and I kind of put this in my story when I broke it. I said, I think Virginia Tech fans might be a little upset as a whole. No Miami, but T- from here, 2-hour trip down to Winston-Salem's not bad. And if you live in North Carolina, Winston-Salem is fairly easy for the most part to get to.
Yeah.
And you still have UVA. Pitt is like, okay, it's kind of a trek up through West Virginia. But as a whole, you also get the other half of the conference at least 2 times every 4 years. Like you get Florida State, Clemson. There's not much to be complaining about besides not having Miami.
So let me point out that of the 3 teams that Tech plays every year, Pitt and Wake travel in tandem. And the third one is UVA. So when UVA is at home, Pitt and Wake are on the road, and vice versa. So any year where you've got UVA at home, there's a little bit more flexibility as to the other 3 matchups being good, and that's why 2024 and 2026 are pretty good.
Yeah.
So 2025, you get at home, you got Boston College, Florida State, Pitt, and Wake. On the road, you got Miami, NC State, Syracuse, and UVA. Again, solid road schedule. So the next year, 2026, and David, you liked this one. The home games are Duke, Miami, UNC, and UVA.
You get back to your natural North Carolina, Miami, Virginia.
Yeah.
And you get a road trip to Clemson for the first time since 2012.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Clemson,
so-
Georgia Tech, Pitt, and Wake.
Florida State coming to Lane Stadium in 2025 for the first time since 2012. NC State visiting for the first time since 2015, and I'm not counting the 2020 COVID year. So to me, all right, there are pluses and minuses of the schedule. Obviously, the minuses are fewer games against Miami and UNC. At the same time, it's not like we're going to be playing those teams once a decade, like Florida State or Louisville or something like that. All right, so from 2014 to 2021, Virginia Tech played Florida State, Louisville, NC State, and Clemson a total of 5 times in the regular season, which is an average of I think it was 0.625 games per year against those 4 teams. From 2023 through 2026, they're going to play those 4 teams 8 times, an average of 2 games per year. So
that's pretty good.
When Virginia Tech got invited to the ACC, at first it was Miami and Virginia Tech, an 11-team conference, and you're sitting there thinking, okay, cool, we'll play. We're not going to play them every year, but we'll play Clemson a lot. We'll play Florida State a lot. We'll play NC State a lot. This is not what I signed up for when Virginia Tech joined the ACC.
Yeah.
This whole never playing Florida State or NC State and teams like that. So by expanding the conference to so many teams, it's the scheduling is always going to be unbalanced in bigger conferences, but the bigger the conference has gotten, the more unbalanced the scheduling has gotten, especially with the old model. It stinks that you're not going to be playing Miami or UNC every year, but on the whole, this is better.
Yeah.
This is better.
I agree.
Absolutely
I agree
better.
100%. You're going to have, it's not going to be the same old schedule ever. You've got to, imagine this year, Virginia Tech fans who or I guess next year would have been an even better example. Virginia Tech would have had to go to Miami, Georgia Tech, and Virginia and Boston College. That is like a miserable road schedule. That's a lot of traveling for fans.
Yep.
This, okay, and a couple of those years are long road trips, like having Boston and Tallahassee in the same year, or Miami and Syracuse. But besides that, you look at
a lot of these are drivable.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that. Tech won't play Miami in 2023 or 2024.
Right.
But Virginia Tech will get NC State, Florida State, and Clemson, and I think those are the matchups that Virginia Tech's been missing. Those are big state schools.
Yes.
Virginia Tech is a big state school, and Virginia Tech hasn't gotten to play any of those guys in forever. Exactly. And now Virginia Tech...
And you're going to get all 3 of them in the next 2 years.
College football is about big state schools that care about football.
That's right.
As far as I know. And we're
the Big Ten and the SEC agree.
Right. So we'll get into this more in the next segment, obviously, but there's no way, absolutely no way, for a fan of any ACC team, including Virginia Tech, to be happy about the ACC schedule every year because there's not enough big state schools in this. Yeah. There's too many Wakes,
too many private schools,
and Syracuses and Boston colleges, teams with small fan bases that don't travel, that don't care about football. So you're never going to be able to get an ACC schedule right because the concept of the conference has been flawed from the very beginning in the 1950s with the type of schools that were invited, and then they doubled down on it over the last 20 years in terms of conference expansion.
Let me ask you this one question, Will.
Yep.
You were in Tallahassee in 2018. How fun was that trip?
That was a lot of fun because Florida State thought they were going to be good that year. and the tailgating was great.
So Virginia Tech gets to go there next year.
Yeah.
You get to go back 5 years later.
I already know Richie Davis is going to be hitting me up saying, let's go.
But that's my point. You don't get to go to Clemson, unfortunately, for a couple years until 2026. But
I've never been to Clemson.
Yeah, I've never been to Clemson either. Getting to go to Tallahassee and Louisville next year.
I've actually never been to games against NC State, Clemson, Florida State, or Louisville. The big 4 that I want to play.
When was the last time Tech played at Clemson?
2012.
Yeah.
They played twice at Clemson since joining the ACC.
Yeah.
2007.
One of them. The 2007 game was the That was the Eddie Royal punt return. For
That was
a
the
touchdown
special
game.
teams game.
Yeah.
Special teams and defense.
Yeah.
But
all
yeah,
right.
I think as a whole, getting to travel down and play in these road environments, like in 2024, Duke, North Carolina, Pitt, and Wake, that's kind of what you're used to. But like Tech will get a taste of this on a Thursday night, but like getting to go down to Raleigh and play at NC State. NC State's going to be pretty good at football this year, but that school is rowdy, and it matches Virginia Tech.
They used to have a Center Street before Raleigh shut it down.
Getting to go down and tailgate with those fans and be in that environment.
Like-minded fan base, right?
That's, I think, what the ACC's been missing for so long.
Nice. So now I'm fired up.
Yeah.
All right. So we got to put us. We've worn this out, and we're going to wear the next topic out. Conference realignment. So we need to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will talk about the shifting landscape of college athletics. All right, everybody, welcome back in. So we're going to talk about conference realignment here soon, but even bigger news, Virginia Tech has announced or released their new helmet design for the 2022 football season. They just put a picture on Twitter, and David, what'd you see?
I don't know.
We had no idea.
I completely I did see it, but
David was on vacation this weekend for the 4th, so when they rolled it out, honestly, I didn't even see it till yesterday.
You mentioned it when we were coming out of the break, and I was like,
what?
I was like, no, I remember seeing it, but it's not like with all this conference realignment stuff going on. I was more focused on that, and I see a helmet. I'm not Clark Rowland. I'm not a helmet connoisseur
every week anyway, so I don't know what I'm looking at. Right?
Like I'm not one to notice the difference in the helmets.
All right, it resonated with me, and here's why. They released a picture of a maroon helmet with no stripes on the top.
I'm going to go look.
And so this goes way back to, I remember being at Greg Roberts' bar way back in 1998. It's like the summer of 1998. And Greg held up a new helmet design, which was a maroon helmet with no stripes. And Tech had stripes all through the 80s and 90s.
Since I first started watching, they always had a stripe.
Oh, those are pretty nice.
Until 98.
So that's kind of cool. I think it'll look good. And we have no info on what the white helmet's going to look like. I don't know if it's going to go stripeless or not. Actually, I do know, but I'm not telling. So let's move on to conference realignment. And, So I want to start, and then I'll tee you guys up. Okay. UCLA and USC, I mean, it was like thief in the night type stuff. All these conference moves now are ninja style. So USC and UCLA go into the Big Ten. And Shelton Moss texted me, and he said, Will, you're a lot older than I am. And I said, thank you, Shelton. And he said, is this the most, like, I don't think he used the word seismic, but he said, is this the most seismic conference move you've seen? And that's a really good question. And I would have to say yes, and I'll tell you why. The thing that really kicked off the modern era of conference shifting was Penn State saying they're going to the Big Ten back in 1990.
What conference was Penn State in at that
None.
point?
They were independent.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That was Tech, Florida State,
Miami,
South Carolina, Miami.
They were all independent.
I think I'm leaving somebody out. All independents. There used to be really good independents in college football.
But the press had kind of been talking and telling you these things were coming, you know, that this stuff was going to start to happen, and that kicked it off. Mm-hmm. And we've seen moves that were unexpected. But when you look at a map, it's just weird. and it came out of nowhere, and I don't know how it's going to work. And although Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC was a surprise, I think this has really got people shaken up more.
I would say last year's more seismic with Texas and Oklahoma going, because I think that precipitated this move.
That's true.
So I don't know that this move would have happened if Texas and Oklahoma hadn't made that move last summer. I think that was, this is the Big Ten matching that move to a certain extent, adding the California market, I guess.
Yeah.
So to me, I would say that's more of a seismic shift. That being said, like, this one from the standpoint, like, it's going to kill the Pac-12's done.
Mm-hmm.
They're done. Their TV contract, I mean, without
TV contract?
Without those two, I mean, their contract expires in a couple of years, and apparently Fox is not interested in renegotiating, especially without USC and UCLA.
Yeah.
So they're done. Like, they're like, move over, Mac, on Wednesday night. Pac-12's taking that Wednesday night spot, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe it won't be that bad. It won't be that bad, but it's still going to be a significant step back. So, and if any conference is open to being gutted right now, it's them. And you're already seeing, like the Big 12 saying, or not the Big 12 saying, but sources indicating that the Big 12, which was gutted last year, is now contemplating making a move for some of those Pac-12
they're looking
teams.
at the Pac-12 going, how you doing?
Right. So everybody's talking about the P2, and I agree that there's two way ahead of everybody else, and that's how it is, and that's not going to change now. But I think, maybe by this time next year, the gutting of the Pac-12 will be complete. So technically speaking, it'll be a Power 4. You're going to have the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC.
So, Nick, if you haven't already, go ahead and put up the graphic that shows the current membership of conferences, and we'll leave that sitting here, and I'll address it in a minute.
I think this one was more seismic because I do agree with Chris that last year's led into this. Texas and Oklahoma, bombshell out of nowhere, they're going to the SEC. Well, they're going for money purposes. Right. And it makes sense because if you look at the list, it's Texas, Oklahoma, like in the Big 12. Texas, Oklahoma, nobody else really jumps out at you at all. Yeah. And it makes sense. Like it's not like Texas is that far from the SEC because College Station's already in the SEC. This one is wild. Yeah. First of all, UCLA, it's kind of like the Texas Oklahoma stuff. UCLA approached the Big Ten about expanding. Like, you're a school, University of California, Los Angeles. The most western school in the Big Ten is Nebraska. And now UCLA and USC are going to be in the Big Ten by
now Nebraska looks like they're in the footprint.
Nebraska is going to be in the center of the Big Ten. And I know I tweeted this, and I know Chris had similar thoughts. Like, imagining, we obviously don't know exactly what this is going to look like, but if this is how it's going to look like for Olympic sports as well, imagining Maryland baseball trying to go play a West Coast series against UCLA Friday, Saturday, Sunday in Pacific time, turning around, having to come back and play a midweek against like Towson.
Right. Yep.
And then to turn around and fly back and play like Nebraska. I mean, it just, between the travel and everything, it's just so crazy. And then, of course, it's set in motion everything we're going to go through now.
I think it's absolutely idiotic that obviously all these conference moves are made for football purposes, all of them. And yet the conferences have not gotten together and said, you know what, it's a really bad idea for Rutgers volleyball to have to go play UCLA and USC, right? It does not make any sense for the Olympic sports, which you run at a loss. They run in the red, quite frankly. Big time. It doesn't make any sense for them to go play a bunch of midweight games in a geographic region so far away.
Most of them take commercial flights anyway.
Right. And so, like, and I even mean, like, there's no reason for, like, Virginia Tech and Boston College to play in volleyball. Like, there should be regional conferences for the smaller sports.
Yeah. I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah, that's that's an interesting concept. It's
Yeah.
complex. I can't wrap my brain around it right now.
Yeah.
But I will say this, with the TV contracts getting so big, it wouldn't surprise me if they're not already doing it. See, athletic departments have their own private jets, maybe more than one,
mean,
that they use.
I
for
can't
the
wait for
non-res.
Ohio State to commission their own 737.
You know, whatever
Yeah.
it takes to get the
It's
non-res
just-
here and there.
It's just kind of crazy when you think about it, because like Chris said, this kind of puts in motion what the Pac-12 is doing. And there was something last night from CBS about how the Pac-12 and the ACC are supposedly potentially going to try to play like a conference championship game. Just crazy
No,
stuff.
they're not. They're going to get together and they're going to form an alliance and
They
put
can
out a
call it
bunch
the
of PR
alliance.
emails for a week.
But so I think this just shows you how far ahead the SEC and Big Ten are of everyone else. The Big 12 and the ACC are kind of just sitting there. The Pac-12 will kind of fade a little bit over time. Probably some schools, Oregon, Washington might go join the
Might make
Big Ten.
jump. Yeah.
But it's just kind of nuts to see how much money matters in this landscape.
And you all right, I talked about how there's too many schools in the ACC whose fan bases are too small and they don't care about football.
Wake
And
Forest is a great example.
Okay, well, I did ticket sales. I accumulated the ticket sales, the whole athletic department ticket sales for every Power 5 school yesterday.
Here comes some numbers.
I
And we don't have a
I
graphic.
don't remember the exact numbers for all schools. I didn't know I would get into this today, so I didn't print them off. But I do remember that in the Pac-12, schools like Cal, Oregon State, and Washington State were all below 10 million in ticket sales.
This is
So,
football and basketball.
combined. Like their ticket sales were lower than Rutgers. Like those West Coast people, I mean, obviously Oregon fans are different, but like they just don't care
Most people-
about sports.
most
out
people
there
who
as
go to
much.
Cal
at least they
probably-
don't go to games. They
Yeah.
don't buy tickets.
Most people who are going to Cal probably care more about academics.
Oh, no
than they do
question, no
athletics.
question. So you're not going to get a big TV contract when a large number of your member institutions show that that the fan base actually doesn't care.
Yeah.
And so I think the Pac-12 is done. Like nobody's going to want to join them.
No.
Why would you?
My guess is they merge. My guess is they end up like merging with the Big 12.
Some of the
Mountain
schools
West
will.
or
Right.
something like
like
we'll
that.
have to see. So,
But I mean, some will join the Big 12. I expect.
Yeah, Colorado.
Right. And then what the leftovers will merge with the Mountain West.
Yeah,
I would
something.
assume.
Yeah.
So, David, let me ask you about. We wanted you to talk a little bit. Now, we are not attorneys. Do not take our legal advice.
Yeah.
But I do want you to talk about. I know you've read an article recently about the Grant of Rights that the ACC signed that runs through 2036. 14 years from now. And
It might be our ultimate savior, your boy Swafford.
explain what that is and what it means, because it's important to the discussion of whether or not the ACC will be poached. So
Yes.
go.
So the Grant of Rights essentially says if a school were to leave the conference, all of their TV revenue would go back to the conference.
The TV revenue from their new conference would go back
so
to the ACC.
If USC and UCLA are leaving, but the Pac-12's Grant of Rights expires after the 23-24 year, you see the perfect timing.
Not a big deal.
They're leaving when their Grant of Rights expires.
Right.
Pac-12's trying to renegotiate TV deals and everything right now. But in terms of the ACC, if Miami or Florida State or Clemson were to leave the ACC and go to the SEC, whatever money they would make, they would have to
SEC
from the SEC. They would have to pay back to the ACC
for 13 or 14 years.
which is why this is such a big deal.
Yeah. And so you read an article by Andy Staples, I think, where he talked about, he spoke with an attorney about whether or not schools can get out of a Grant of Rights.
What options they would have. Yeah, so Andy Staples from The Athletic, and I encourage everybody to go read this if you're a subscriber. He sat down with a guy named Mark Wilhelm. He's a former Villanova law student. Back in 2014, he published an article in the Harvard Law Review or something like that on the Grant of Rights. And he owns a copy, or still has a copy, of North Carolina's ACC Grant of Rights, which he FOIA'd. And
That's probably like 50 pages long, right?
Yeah, it's about 2 or 3 pages. And that was one of the big things that caught my eye was it's like you would think it's a very easy agreement to get out of, but it's essentially a 2 or 3 page agreement. And he said there are 4 ways ACC schools could go about potentially trying to get out of the ACC's grant of rights. You could leave the conference. That means you're leaving all of that money you make in the new conference behind. You're giving it back to the old conference, which we already mentioned. You could try to sue to get your rights back, essentially, but that's a lot of money, and who knows if you even win the suit. You could try to negotiate a deal with the conference, essentially like a buyout, saying, we'll pay you X amount a year, for however long. Or you could hope the league dissolves and the grant of rights along with it. And those are essentially your 4 options of trying to get out of the grant of rights.
None of them are great.
None of them are great when you are in a conference like the ACC, where it's kind of split down the middle, half state schools, half private institutions. And if you think... I've done a lot of thinking about this. If the ACC were to split up, the state schools, the ones that people truly care about, have a lot of fans, marketable, the North Carolina State, the Clemson, the Florida State. Miami's probably the only private institution that's really going to get pulled. Maybe Duke for basketball.
Yeah.
Maybe Duke for basketball. Besides that, pretty much everybody else, the private institutions, they're not really getting taken, and so that leaves kind of a group like there's not really, in my mind, unless something major happens, going to be a time where the ACC completely dissolves, because the core of Boston College, Syracuse, maybe even Pitt, Wake Forest, those schools are going to hold the conference together because they're not necessarily attractive to other school or other conferences.
So, Nick, is the graphic still up with the conference membership on it? Right. So if you look at that graphic, you'll notice that I've highlighted some schools that are not in the SEC and the Big Ten currently, or in their plans. And so when people talk, independent of the GOR, which David is right, is pretty onerous. And the way I phrased that in a message board post was, I don't think you're going to wake up tomorrow and find out Florida State and Clemson are leaving. I just don't think that's going to happen.
No.
So, but schools that columnists talk about being attractive to the Big Ten and the SEC, I've highlighted, and I know that if you're just listening, you can't see this, so I'll go over them. I've highlighted 7 schools. They're Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina. Notre Dame, of course, is a layup. They'd be Big Ten bound. And columnists have also mentioned Oregon and Washington from the Pac-12. An 8th school that columnists have thrown out there is UVA, which I don't really understand. I get that they win a lot of national championships in some of the non-revenue sports.
If you're talking Big Ten, they want AAU membership.
Yeah.
I think what if somebody were to take a school from, like, if somebody could take a school from Virginia, it depends on, like, if you're the Big Ten looking at academics. But I do think
Big Ten would take UVA.
Yeah, but I do think it'd be interesting for them, for like one of those schools, if you say, okay, you can try to merge into the state of Virginia, expand your reach, with all the academics, Virginia is an interesting choice.
But they have to bring value athletically.
And I think Virginia Tech probably brings more athletic value in terms of money and revenue and ticket sales.
Or these conferences have reached a big enough point where, what's the Big Ten schools are going to be making $80 million per school in a TV contract?
Some people are saying $100 million.
Some people are saying with UCLA and USC close to $100 million
per school. So any school that joins from now on is going to have to be worth themselves $80 to $100 million a year. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you dilute the value and everybody makes slightly less.
Yeah.
Right? So
I agree.
At this point, these conferences are going to be very selective on who they add now, because they're already making so much money. How many available schools are there out there that would actually increase or keep the Big Ten's value the same?
And I think those are
Notre Dame.
Probably the schools that you highlighted. Notre Dame is Notre Dame is
I don't think we would do it.
No.
Right. And so, again, going back to that list, Notre Dame, clearly, they're not going to the SEC. The Big Ten would take them. The Big Ten might have to balance out with someone else. And I know you guys aren't going to like this because Clemson's really good in football and Florida State used to be really good in football. But North Carolina arguably has the second largest national brand on that list.
Right.
behind for all sports, not just football, but for all sports behind Notre Dame.
And they've got and that's a whole new state that neither one of those conferences has a school in.
Yeah.
Right. I think Clemson is interesting because I don't know exactly how much SEC schools make, but when I was doing my ticket sales thing yesterday, Clemson is ahead of only 4 schools in the SEC in ticket sales. So that's the Mississippi schools, Vanderbilt, and Missouri.
And again, that includes football and basketball.
All sports, right? All sports. South Carolina, their in-state rival, sells more tickets than Clemson fans. The SEC fans are just more hardcore than ACC fans. Even the Clemson
Even
fans.
the hardcore ACC
Even the
fans.
hardcore ACC fans, right? And Clemson, I don't know how much. Do you know off the top of your head how much money per team the SEC
about?
teams make?
I think
It's
previously
currently 60 some million.
Yeah, I think currently it's really close to 70.
Now Clemson already being in the SEC market, already in that marketplace. Their market is not expanded by adding Clemson.
Yeah, might not provide
Does
much
Clemson
value.
add 60 to 70 million per year?
Yeah.
See, that's the thing.
I don't know.
I don't
If you get a football matchup where it's Clemson, Alabama.
Well, sure, but at this point, you add more teams. Okay, so that's an extra 2 SEC teams. So now you've got Clemson versus Auburn this week, but there's only so many time slots, so you end up just kicking another game off the networks completely. So you really ended up making a lot more money here.
Yeah.
Because this game, which would normally be on ESPN2, it's kicked back to the SEC network now.
And what that is analogous to is we could run 10 articles a day on Tech Sideline, but nobody's going to read all 10 of them.
Right. So it's better to space them out.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. These schools would have to do the math. I don't think there's.
I think Florida State and Miami are other great examples because they're already the big state schools. Florida,
right?
They already have Florida.
Right.
How much would bringing in Florida State and Miami really expand the SEC?
Well,
Notre Dame and North Carolina are huge, and I think Oregon in the Pac-12, Oregon would be huge, especially with Nike and everything that comes with it. But
and at this point, if the SEC and the Big Ten were concerned about quality, then USC's been a dumpster fire recently.
yeah.
They're not getting added because their football program is good.
No, they're getting added because they live in Los Angeles.
Exactly. And same for UCLA. The SEC didn't add Texas because Texas is still good at football. Texas isn't any good at football, but they're still getting added because they're in the state of Texas.
Because they're freaking Texas.
Right. So this isn't about quality anymore.
About money.
It's about what a school can bring from a financial perspective to make everybody's slice of the pie bigger. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
So let me throw something that, unfortunately, I just started thinking about it this morning, so I didn't have a chance to run some numbers. Something that I haven't seen anybody talk about is, I remember when the Big Ten Network and the SEC Network were first launched, there was the discussion of how much money is generated by subscribers in market and out of market. And by in market, that means if you live in the state of South Carolina and you get the SEC Network on Dish Network, you're in market. So the SEC is getting, let's say, these numbers aren't correct, the SEC is getting $2 since you're in market. If you're like me and you live in the state of Virginia, which is, there are no SEC schools in the state of Virginia. I'm a Dish Network subscriber. I get the SEC Network. I think the SEC only gets like 50 cents because I'm out of market. If the SEC adds a Virginia school and a North Carolina school, you'd have to run the numbers on it. How many millions of people, and we're talking traditional cable and satellite, how many millions of people will go from 50 cents per household to $1 or $2 per household?
Or just people that weren't subscribers already. I mean, how many Virginia Tech fans watch the ACC or the SEC Network?
Right.
Like, there's no.
I've got it, but
I've got it too, but I don't know. There's not necessarily a reason to watch it unless Virginia Tech is playing an SEC team.
So it's not about that type of television anymore. I get that, but that's still a factor.
Yeah.
But you're still technically paying for it.
Yeah.
Right?
You are.
Yeah.
If there are, I'm just going to throw a number out there. There's 8 million people in the state of Virginia. Let's say there's 2 million households, and you go from 50 cents to $2. That's 2 times $1.50.
That's 4 times as much.
That's $3 million a month extra being generated by a school like Virginia Tech, $36 million a year. Interesting to think about if those numbers have any basis in reality.
$36 million a year, but not the 50 to 60 million per year that SEC teams are currently making.
Only the SEC people know what the actual numbers would be. So to me, in a perfect world, UVA and UNC go to the Big Ten, and Virginia Tech and NC State go to the SEC.
That would make sense based on the culture of both conferences and both of those schools.
Yeah.
But again, we're not. I think we're past that point.
Yes.
We're well past that point.
So I just, again, when you look at all of the conference memberships and the teams still left on the table, I'm not sure the SEC and the Big Ten are going to continue to expand.
I think. I think the Big Ten will add Notre Dame.
At some point.
I think Notre Dame's TV contract expires in 2025.
Correct.
And I think they've played the whole thing through the years really smart. But with them, having so many natural rivals in the Big Ten, their football program's actually growing right now.
And by the way, they've added USC, which is a traditional Notre Dame rival.
It was a traditional Notre Dame rival.
USC, Michigan, Michigan State.
I think it's finally going to happen. With
and the money disparity is just too big for Notre Dame to continue to ignore.
You're talking about an extra, from what they make from the NBC contract and what they make from the ACC contract, you're talking about a difference of $50 million a year.
I think it's only $35 million a year combined to what you just said,
right.
And the Big Ten's going to be pushing $100 million.
Right.
That's
so
insane.
you're still on about $50 to $80 million difference.
Yeah.
So it's never really been about the money for Notre Dame. It's been more about valuing their independence. What is the value of your independence?
Yeah.
I would argue that it's maybe worth about
and how
20 to 25 million, but it's not worth 80 million.
How much money do you want to make? I think it all kind of comes back to that. Like, if you're the Big Ten and you're sitting here saying Oregon fans are diehard, we could get Oregon in the Oregon we could pair them up with Notre Dame. I think Oregon would be
right, because you want to keep it at an even number.
Yeah.
So
that would be
right.
what, 18? But I'm not really sure. Like, I think you posted the poll. I don't think it's this Twitter poll.
Oh, well, we're going to.
But
go ahead.
You mentioned how many teams in terms of expanding. How many teams would each conference have to expand to, the SEC and the Big Ten, for people to feel comfortable with Virginia Tech getting in? I said like 22 each.
Yeah.
See, it's currently 32. It'd have to go all the way for you. I think 44, and I just don't
40
see
to
that
44
happen.
range. I don't either, because you reach a point where any school you add dilutes the value.
Yeah.
Because they're not worth as much money.
Yeah.
I think 40 max is where those two schools combined are going to end up.
That's a stretch.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the people that make these decisions are thinking about other factors as well.
Probably 36. That's probably what you're going to get. I can imagine the SEC taking on two more teams, the Big Ten taking on Notre Dame and somebody else, and then
it really gets to be a stretch.
And then then you've got those two power conferences, and it. You mentioned one of you guys mentioned
college football north, college football south. They shouldn't even keep the same names.
One of you guys mentioned earlier that it might just be 4 conferences. I mean, you can imagine some of the rest of the Pac-12 just merges in with the Mountain West and the Big 12, and then the ACC, because the Grant of Rights is still keeping it intact. It's the ACC.
Stays like it is.
But just like what's recruiting? What's all that stuff going to look like in that landscape? Like when USC can recruit New York, because
the thing is, you can only sign 25 guys a year. So I don't think USC's recruiting would look all that different, because there's so many players in California. Yeah. I don't think recruiting would change all that much, because like again, teams can only sign 25 players.
Yeah. So long term, you're looking at the P2, and you're looking at the Big 12 and the ACC and the Pac-12 and other schools trying to figure something out. And Virginia Tech, likely winding up in that second tier. Mm-hmm. So this poll I'm about to tell you about is self-serving, because I'm like, okay, what's the future of Tech Sideline if they're not part of the P2? Yeah. And so I ran a poll on Twitter over the weekend, and I said, long term, if Virginia Tech is outside the SEC Big Ten and instead is affiliated with schools like NC State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, UVA, Cincinnati, WVU, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Arizona State, etc. What will it do to your overall VT fandom, not just football? And Nick, if you can put that graphic up, he's got it up. So the answers are 53% said that their fandom for Virginia Tech would stay the same. 23% said their fandom would decrease. Almost 1 out of every 4 people said, I'll be less of a fan. 21% said, I don't know. And I think that's a fair answer. That's like 1 out of every 5 people saying, I have no idea. I'd have to see what that looked like.
Depends on who those other teams are.
Yes. And what the scheduling arrangements are. Are they in a separate division with a championship?
Is it
all
just
that
for
stuff.
football?
And 3% said would increase their fandom of Virginia Tech sports. And I know what that 3% is thinking. Great, we might actually be able to compete for some sort of championship.
Right.
So, again, that was self-serving. I need to think about the long-term future of my business if Tech winds up.
No doubt, because I was wondering, the same stuff, of course.
So, talk about the advantages of something like that, Chris.
Yeah, there are pluses and minuses to being included at the table and being in some hypothetical second division. Right now, the advantages of a second division is a lot of our peers would also be in that group. Ultimately, whether it's a top division or a second division, I want to compete against peer institutions that care about football and have a reasonable chance of success. I thought that's what I was getting with the ACC, but as the ACC continue, it's just a bunch of private schools that don't care about football.
They care about basketball.
Right. Now, if you throw everything out the window, throw the money out the window, and if you told me Virginia Tech was in a league with West Virginia, UVA, NC State, Cincinnati, Louisville, Georgia Tech, your regional teams with bigger fan bases, the conference wasn't so big. Let's say it was like a 9-team conference.
I know, that's another thing.
And you played the same conference teams every year, and they rotated home and away, and you wouldn't have to go 10 years without playing NC State. Your natural rivalries were there. I think as a fan, I would enjoy that more. Because I'm done pretending that Virginia Tech is in the same division with Ohio State and Clemson and Alabama. Because technically on paper, yes, they're all FBS football teams, technically speaking. The reality of it is those teams compete at such a higher level. I don't think it's fair to Virginia Tech to have to compete against them. I don't think it's fair to them to have to technically compete against Virginia Tech either. All right? My biggest worry in an issue like that would be, what does a TV contract look like and how does it affect Virginia Tech Olympic sports, quite frankly?
Right. Yeah.
Because I think even winning the ACC, I want a chance to win the conference that I'm in. And, Pitt won it this past year, but it seems to me like once every 10 years, somebody besides Clemson's going to win the ACC.
Yeah.
And it's going to depend on Clemson having a down year, not everybody else doing something right. Both things have to happen.
Yeah.
So, I don't even think Virginia Tech stands a reasonable chance of winning the ACC anymore. And what's the point of even competing if you can't compete for championships? Is my take on the whole thing.
All right. David, your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think one of my biggest questions would be, how does it impact Olympic sports?
Yeah.
We just saw Virginia Tech
and basketball.
won the ACC in basketball.
Right.
Everybody cares so much and so much about college athletics is football because that's what drives the money. But I think my favorite sport to enjoy, I think, is college basketball. Mm-hmm. It's so raw, especially compared to the NBA.
There's parity.
And so much parity. Well, what happens, are Duke and North Carolina and Kansas all gonna form one super basketball conference? Right. How are teams going to be is Virginia Tech going to be in a different conference for one Olympic sport versus another Olympic sport? How that whole thing turns out, I have absolutely no idea. But I do think if, football aside, if it makes the other sports, I think there's a chance it could raise the competition level in pretty much everything outside of football. And because you're saying, okay, Virginia Tech can't compete on the same stage as Georgia, Oklahoma, Alabama in football, but Virginia Tech can compete on the same stage as the best in every other sport. Yeah. A lot of people might lose interest because of, football competition not being as good. Virginia Tech might have better chances to win, like Chris just said. But I think, like in my case, like I would still be very interested if Virginia Tech has a chance to compete against some really, really good teams in college basketball.
Am I trading Wake Forest for West Virginia?
Yeah,
damn right. I am.
Imagine
I'm trading Duke for East Carolina fans for football. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential positives. Imagine the road trips. Imagine, for example, like there's a basketball conference. Virginia Tech gets to go play at Kansas. Like that's a middle of nowhere, but Kansas is a basketball program. Die hard.
Well, I think we've seen this year that when the other sports other than football are competitive, it can be a lot of fun.
And don't assume, and this is a completely wrong assumption, that all of a sudden Virginia Tech would become less talented. Because that's not true. Because like there's a bunch of teams in the Big Ten that make a lot more money than Virginia Tech right now, like your Indianas and your Purdue's and your Northwesterns.
And your Illinois and Rutgers.
Right, and they've got a lot more money than Virginia Tech. And they're not more talented than Virginia Tech.
Tech's still better.
Right, exactly. And you can only take 25 guys per year. And right now, Virginia Tech, let's say a second division did exist, and it's West Virginia and UVA
State.
And Oklahoma State and NC State and Georgia Tech. I mean, those are the schools Virginia Tech's already recruiting against. Like, we're not recruiting against Clemson anymore. Yeah. We're not recruiting against Miami anymore or teams like that.
Arguably not even recruiting against Penn State.
Our recruiting right now is exactly what it would be if there was a split, an official split. Yeah. But like I said, that split already exists. Yeah. Just it isn't in name, and it happens to be one team in the ACC that operates at top division level, and everybody else doesn't.
Yeah. I think we all sat together for the softball regional. Yeah. You remember how fun that was against Kentucky. Yeah. Imagine that's an every weekend thing.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech playing those types of games. Or for baseball. Virginia Tech playing Oklahoma in baseball. Like a team like that caliber of a series every single weekend.
Right.
Like, I think it could raise the competition of a lot of other sports. And in terms of football, I don't think recruiting is that really affected.
No, because we're already recruiting against those quote-unquote second division teams. That's who we already recruit against. Yeah. The line already exists. People just haven't seen it yet.
It just hasn't been put. So it ultimately it requires leadership from somewhere.
Oh, well, and that's the problem. Like, this is like Sopranos, man. You've got one mob boss trying to get an advantage over the other mob boss. Instead of all the mob bosses meeting together to sort it out, they just send out hitmen, right? So this is... like, why is there not some sort of big meeting between all the conferences, the commissioners, the ADs, the school presidents, the networks, and just sit around a table for a couple of weeks and hash it out? Give us our new version of college sports.
Because some people get their feelings hurt.
Yeah. They're going to get hurt anyway.
Well, that's what I mean. Well, I think it's just funny because, especially like with this whole realignment, ESPN and Fox are over there. They're like puppets. Like they're like
strings. They're at war with each other.
Sure.
Yeah, I know, and that's the thing.
And it's clearly you've seen where they aligned.
Yeah.
And so, like, I mean, the Big Ten keeps expanding, so there's only so many time slots, right? So you want to get out of your Pac-12 deal so you can have more time slots for your Big Ten teams that you're seriously backing. I wonder if ESPN would do the same thing with, like, I wonder if they regret tying themselves to the ACC through 2036.
You gotta wonder, don't you? Like, what if the GR gets torn up because ESPN comes and says, "Hey, we don't want this to be a thing anymore."
Yeah.
Although it's not really.
Yeah, it's not something I'm worried about a lot because I'm not a worrisome type by nature,
and we can't
control it.
Yeah.
But I do think if like, let's say Clemson did leave. And the ACC wasn't the ACC anymore, that'd actually be like I would be in favor of just gutting the conference and saying, all right, if we're not in the top division, if there actually was an official line drawn in the sand, and we weren't in the top division anymore, I'd be like, okay, there's no point of being affiliated with Boston College.
I was about to say, you can kick Boston College
We
out.
can use that, and we're like, okay, this restructuring makes it invalid, so we're out. Hey, West Virginia. Hey, NC State. Hey, Georgia Tech. Hey, East Carolina. Any other school in the region with fans who actually care about football, form their own football league.
I hear you. I just remember those. That was the idea with the Metro. They were going to form a super conference, and instead they screwed the pooch and kicked Virginia Tech out. The Big East, remember? The 8 Big East football schools were going to break away from the basketball schools until the day they weren't, and Virginia Tech got left out of that. So it's just very difficult for university presidents who make these decisions to properly manage that process.
Yeah, the whole thing is, though, like, I don't think there's that many teams left who would trigger, obviously USC and UCLA with where they're located was a trigger. Texas and Oklahoma, but because they're Texas and Oklahoma, they were a trigger. Notre Dame is the only one I see left that is definitely a trigger for another round.
Yeah.
Right?
I'd agree with
and,
that.
and like I said, even Clemson. Does Clemson add... But
I don't even know if it's worth it outside of Notre Dame examining any other ACC schools as a trigger, because every other ACC school will have plenty of not like foresight. Like, you will see it coming. If an ACC school not named Notre Dame is going to leave, you'll know. Like just because of the whole grant of rights deal, and because if a school like North Carolina is going to be that risky and leave, it's going to be fairly obvious, and I don't think North Carolina would be the only one.
Well, the point to be made here, as the GOR gets older and older and older, the cost for leaving gets less and less.
Yeah.
So literally 5 to 7 years from now, you could start, things could start shifting. So I think we've worn that out, fellas. David, has anybody been looking at the YouTube chat or any questions there we want to answer?
Nick has.
I mean, I know Nick's been looking at it, but he doesn't have a microphone.
I will check. I will say, heck of a time to be an athletic director. Like, imagine what Whit Babcock's phone looks like right now.
I was going to say, but he's not the one making the decision. Tim Sands is.
Yeah, it's people mistake and say it's athletic directors.
No, they don't have anything.
Jim Weaver had nothing to do with Virginia Tech getting the ACC. That's all political stuff behind the scenes. Not to say that athletic directors aren't involved, but this is an entire university.
Chris, you'll love this. Sean Barker, thoughts on a promotion relegation system in college football? If the FBS split into 2 groups.
Keep it to a minute, Chris. Go.
It's very, very difficult because in soccer you're dealing with one team and the finances of one team.
That's true.
You're not talking about the finances of an entire athletic department. Are you going to tell your women's lacrosse coach that your salary is getting cut 50% next year because the football team got relegated and lost half their television revenue?
And your entire conference has a TV deal, not just you.
Not just you.
So you might be moving from, it's complicated.
Yeah. So it would need to be. It would need to be a lot more streamlined than college sports currently are. And even then, I don't think it would work because football affects the salaries of so many other sports.
Yeah.
Michael Fogelgren asks, how do we not get discouraged in terms of helping fund NIL stuff when we keep hearing about a Power 2 conference structure with VT on the outside looking in? I think that's an interesting point.
I get in here and if you want to join the SEC, let me make it very, very clear what you're getting yourself into.
You better be ready.
You better be ready to buy Virginia Tech football players to compete at that level,
legally and illegally.
Right. I've been doing this job for almost 20 years now, and I've known college coaches. I've known people who work at Virginia Tech and other schools in recruiting departments, and they all tell the same stories about the SEC. You're only going to be able to compete in that league one way if you're Virginia Tech, and that is not in our culture. As a fan base, as an athletic department, everything.
And it's not going to be in our culture during our lifetimes.
Okay, so I'll tell you a story, and I'm not going to say what schools this was. It was a long time ago with neither of the current coaching staffs in place, but there was an out-of-state recruit who was going to visit 2 schools in one state, both SEC schools. They're in-state rivals. You'll probably be able to figure that out. But anyway, he's going to visit both schools in the span of a few days. So he shows up to school A, has a visit, and then tells him he's going to go visit school B. School A coaches said, no, we don't want you to visit there. So they get on the phone with a big donor who's got a vacation house. They put the kid on a plane, illegally, of course, fly him to this big donor's vacation house where he stays so he doesn't visit school B. So doesn't in there. School B figures out that he's down there and flies him back, also illegal, to visit them, right? So it's not just about bag men and NIL and things like that. There are so many dirty tricks in recruiting in the SEC, and we are going to lose all of those battles unless the Virginia Tech big donor base is ready to get in the mud and wrestle. So if you're a big donor, first of all, you better be ready to drop the bag and some NIL money, a lot. And number two, when Brett Pry calls you and said, "Hey, we've got this guy. He's visiting us, and then he's going to go visit South Carolina, and we really want him, but we don't want him to visit South Carolina. Can he come to your house this weekend on the lake?" You better be ready to say yes. Yeah. It's just an entirely different culture that we need. I'm not saying this to be mean and saying that you shouldn't want to go to the SEC or anything like that. I'm saying be careful what you want. You're going to have to live differently. Like the things you disapprove of as a human being, now you're going to have to start doing if you're like a big donor and a fan. It
makes me think of the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. You're
going to have to start listening to the devil if you join the SEC. You have no choice.
Do what he tells you to do.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I scanned the YouTube chat. Not a ton of great questions, but I do think it's interesting. Like somebody said, what if Virginia Tech and the ACC kind of became like a basketball conference? I mean, it already kind of is, but like you add some of the Big East schools.
I'm perfectly fine with keeping a relationship with Wake Forest and Duke and schools like that to play basketball. I just don't want to play them in football anymore. I want to be in a league with, and I don't care if this is top division, second division, whatever division, just from a pure fan perspective. I want to have fun. I want to play like-minded institutions with like-minded fan bases. And like every time Virginia Tech plays at Duke or at Wake, you go tailgate, and then it's just a bunch of Virginia Tech fans, I love Virginia Tech fans, don't get me wrong, but I want to take that road trip and experience other fan bases.
I was about to say, Chris,
they don't have any fans.
Chris wants to be in the same conference as other great tailgating institutions.
Yes, correct. Right.
Call it the tailgate conference.
There you go.
There was a great message board post by a West Virginia fan this past week where he's talked about how West Virginia's lost all their natural rivals. They want to play Pitt and Virginia Tech.
And Penn State.
Right. They don't care about playing Texas Tech and flying all the way across these countries.
Baylor
with fan bases they have nothing in common with. It's not fun anymore for them.
Are you ready, Nick? Are you ready to put up the graphic?
And it's supposed to be fun.
So, Nick, put up the graphic that shows the Big 12 and ACC maps. And the Big 12 is in gray, and the ACC is in blue, and West Virginia is just smack dab in the middle of the ACC. It's just sad.
Oh yeah, I feel bad for him, and it's ridiculous that a school like Boston College is in the ACC and West Virginia is not.
All right, Nick, you can get rid of it now.
Ultimately, the death of this conference, the ACC, will be because we don't have enough West Virginians with fan bases who actually care about football.
Would you say then it is academics?
Yeah, that's the official reason why West Virginia doesn't get it. But then they go off and add Louisville.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to look at. Like I wrote in a message board post last week, just that all the things like to potentially consider. Like, would Virginia Tech fans be okay if Virginia went one way and Virginia Tech went another way?
I bet when I was collecting Virginia Tech T-shirts back when I was younger, I would be willing to bet that one of the top 5 selling T-shirts in Virginia Tech history, as far as like your non-regular VT shirt, right? Your specialty T-shirts, is that old shirt they sold in the late 90s, early 2000s, the good, the bad, the ugly shirt. Yeah. The good with the Virginia Tech logo, the bad with the Virginia logo, and the ugly with the West Virginia logo, or maybe it was the other way around. I don't remember. But you can't make that shirt anymore because Virginia Tech and West Virginia aren't rivals.
No. Right. Yeah.
And
that's what's been lost.
That's what's been lost, and it's not as fun as it used to be. Yeah. I had more fun when Virginia Tech was in the Big East when I think about it than I have since they've been in the ACC. From a football standpoint.
Well, let me pose this question to you, and somebody actually asked this, and I didn't think I would bring it up, but now I will. How many years of the new 3-5-5 ACC football rotation
are we actually going to see?
No, this is what we didn't talk about. Whenever there's conference realignment and one conference adds another conference or adds a school, fans freak out and they're like, "Oh, okay, we need to add schools to respond." No, we don't.
No, you don't.
No, we don't. Who would we add that would actually add value? That would actually increase the amount of money that each ACC school made?
Clearly,
Notre Dame, that's a pipe dream. Well, that ain't happening.
This kind of wraps your point too. With UCLA and USC leaving the Pac-12 for the Big Ten, the ACC is clearly now the third most valuable conference.
Yeah,
that's a crazy thing to think about.
I mean, you got your top two, then you got the ACC, then you got the Big 12 and the Pac-12.
Right.
And when it comes to basketball,
right?
Yes,
so don't even think about adding Pac-12 schools because they were the least valuable conference to begin with, and then they lost their two highest prized commodities. Those schools aren't worth anything except Oregon, and I don't want to add Oregon. Or we just now finally get into a scheduling model that I like. Don't screw it up by adding Texas Tech
and Oregon,
and schools like that. So just.
Would you be okay if the ACC added West Virginia?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, folks. I think we've worn it out. What are we? Man, we're like over an hour and a half. 1:45.
Oh, there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, it was. Sorry we had to cram it all in, but we do have people that travel a lot and farm and things like that love the long podcast.
Yeah.
So appreciate it. And again, this has been the Tech Sideline Podcast, episode 243, sponsored by Commonwealth NIL. Appreciate all the discussion, fellas, and everybody who's watched and listened. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next Tech Sideline Podcast.